The Minnesota Wild finished third in the Central Division in 25-26, but did manage to win their first playoff series in 11 years, defeating the Dallas Stars in 6 games in the opening round, before falling in round 2 in 5 games to the Colorado Avalanche. And of course, injuries to Joel Eriksson Ek and Jonas Brodin, both of whom missed the entire series, and Zach Bogosian, who was only able to appear in a few games. Certainly key losses for the Wild in that series. But they also blew a late 2-goal lead in the third period of that 5th game. And that still had to sting for Bill Guerin's team heading into this offseason.
Absolutely. Anytime that you think you've got a game and then you lose it, it does hurt badly. But they do know going into the offseason that they got a pretty good excuse when you lose Eriksson Ek and Brodin and Bogosian against the mighty Colorado Avalanche. So I think when Bill Guerin and his staff look back, although their goal is the Stanley Cup, I think they will think that this year saw progress in getting to their ultimate goal.
But the expectation that we had for the Wild entering this season was not overly high because they hadn't won a playoff series in 10 years before entering this season. And we kind of had them earmarked for a wild card or even bubble status based on what we saw as a very quiet summer in 2025. And this, even though Zach Parise and Ryan Suter's names largely came off their books, the team is still on the hook for $1.67 million in total through 28-29. But that aside, the biggest acquisitions that the Wild made during the offseason last year was acquiring Vlad Tarasenko via trade from Detroit and signing Nico Sturm as a free agent. You also had the large contract extension given to Kirill Kaprizov, and even though he was limited to just 41 games in 24-25, he did have 56 points in those games and was a plus 19. But when you factor all that in, I didn't think there was a lot of reason for overwhelming optimism.
No, I don't think that we thought there would be overwhelming optimism and that they were going to be as strong as they were. But of course, remember, we didn't see Quinn Hughes in the lineup at that time. Mm-hmm. And Quinn Hughes came into that lineup. They made a good trade. It cost them for sure with Vancouver, but they did get one of the very premier defensemen. I'd say one of the top 3 in the NHL. Tarasenko was traded to them by Detroit. At one point, I guess Stevie Yzerman trying to actually get rid of that contract. And the biggest news of the season probably was that Kaprizov signing, that he's got this monumental, humongous contract that starts next season. It's $17 million a year, which is $5 million ahead of Connor McDavid and $3 million ahead of Draisaitl. It's an enormous contract. But I do still think that they did see progress.
Let's check out the reality of this past season for the Wild. And they did go 3-6-3 through October. And there were some whispers, could John Hines, the head coach, be in trouble? But then they went on a 10-0-2 run in November, which included a 7-game winning streak. And there were 2 other streaks during the course of the year of 7 and 6 wins apiece. And that kind of secured their spot among the elite in the Central with Dallas and with Colorado.
Yeah, the other thing that we've got to mention here, though, Vic, is that Winnipeg took a dive. I mean, not to play off words about the Jets, but they did a nosedive this season after winning the President's Trophy last year. We fully expected that the powerhouses in the Central would be Colorado, Dallas, and Winnipeg, and therefore that's why we had Minnesota trying to get into the wild card, because we never could have expected, nobody could, Winnipeg, as I said, to take such a nosedive or be grounded the way that they were.
You would mention that Quinn Hughes trade that took place on December 12th when they picked up 2 very promising players from Vancouver in defenseman Zeev Buium and forward Liam Ogrim, and they also got center Marco Rossi in this deal, but they also had to give up their first-round pick in this year's draft. But statistically, the team scored 44 more goals than a year ago. Their differential improved by 43 goals, going from minus 11 to plus 32. Special teams, big factor, went from 20th on the PP and 30th on the PK to second on the power play and 13th in penalty killing. The team goals against average went from 16th to 4th, with Jesper Wallstedt, rookie, second in save percentage in the league, only to Scott Wedgwood. So he had a .916 number there and also 4 shutouts. The team had no 30-goal scorers and only 3 with 20-plus in 24-25. This season, Kaprizov, 45 in 78 games, managed to stay healthy throughout. Matt Boldy scored 42. Tarasenko and Ryan Hartman with 23 apiece. Brock Faber on the back line, a career-best 15 goals and 51 points and a plus 18. And Quinn Hughes, in 48 games after the trade, 53 points. So it's really easy to see at this point now why the Wild took this step upwards.
Here's the future for the Minnesota Wild. Jesper Wallstedt in goal, rookie this year. You mentioned him. Great year. Obviously, Kirill Kaprizov, an elite player in the league, an elite goal scorer with 45 this year. Matt Boldy is a terrific player. He showed that not only during the regular season in the playoffs, but also during the Olympics when the U.S. won the gold medal. And the other guy that is amazing, and if continues to be paired with Quinn Hughes, it's a fabulous duo, which is Brock Faber. And as you said, 51 points this season, a tremendous offensive force for them. And of course, Hughes, as we said, that's up there with the McCarrs and the best offensive defenseman in the league. So you've got a reason to think that the Minnesota Wild are going to be in the elite teams in the league for a while now.
Let's check out the work that Bill Guerin has in front of him. The team only has 5 picks in the 2026 draft. We had mentioned that their first-round pick went to Vancouver as part of the acquisition for Quinn Hughes. They also have no picks in the second round, that going to Nashville in a 2025 trade to acquire Gustav Nyquist, who then subsequently signed with the Winnipeg Jets last July. They also have none in the 7th round. That was a trade with Florida in order to acquire Jeff Petrie at the deadline. They do have 2 picks in the 5th round, their own plus San Jose's pick, which included a swap of prospects, and that deal was made 3 years ago. They have $1.2 million in cap space in advance of July 1st, and we did mention that they still have 3 more seasons of the Parise Suter buyout hit, but of course much lower than it was in previous seasons. But Neil, here's where it gets interesting, because 6 out of their 8 UFAs are well into their 30s. Nick Foligno and Matt Zuccarello, 38 years apiece. Marcus Johansson, 35. Tarasenko, 34. Michael McCarron, who is a great pickup from Nashville, 31, and Robby Fabbri, 30. Those are the forwards. On the back line, the aforementioned Petrie is 38, and Zach Bogosian, 35. So this team was the 4th oldest in the NHL this year. So it does stand to reason that they're going to get a little bit younger.
Oh, absolutely. But I will say that the guy that seems like he's bathing in the pool in cocoon is Matt Zuccarello. Was a vital piece of their cog in Minnesota. When he was out of the lineup, they were a different team than when he came back into the lineup. I agree with you that McCarron was a great pickup from Nashville. Big, strong center who made that team a lot tougher, could face up against any big man. So I want to see whether or not Bill Guerin signs Zuccarello. Zuccarello at least will have to take like a 1-year deal at 38 years old. McCarron could probably get a couple of years out of Bill Guerin for his contract, but those would be the guys I'd think that he would sort of earmark to get signed.
And a couple of RFAs up front, Bobby Brink, who came over from the Philadelphia Flyers, and defenseman Damon Hunt. And also something to look at, Neil, Filip Gustavsson, who became the backup goaltender primarily during the course of the playoffs to Wallstedt, having offseason hip surgery, and that may compromise his readiness for training camp. But overall, I think there's a really good foundation here. And is this really a matter for Guerin of just tweaking some support parts?
Absolutely. And I think after so many years of the Minnesota Wild fans going into a season just hoping that they'll make the playoffs, wondering if they're going to make the playoffs, I think they can sit a lot more easy this summer and going into next season knowing that they have a playoff team. It's just how high up in the standings can they finish?